Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of FSU Coach Live. My name's Tim Backhurst, and joined for this session is Dani Dayani. Dani, thank you for joining us. Just give us a little bit of background of where you came from and what you're doing now.
Yes, of course. So thank you, Dr. Tim. Um, I am from South Africa originally. I moved over to the States in 2019 to start my freshman year of college. Grew up in South Africa. My family's still back there. I played soccer for probably since I could walk. And I said, you know what? I want to come over to the States and come to a place where sports is huge and it's actually genuinely appreciated, which is something that I always looked for back home. So yeah, I moved over. I played at a community college in Kansas. COVID hit. Program was no longer. Moved over to Georgia. Finished playing there, and I decided that as much as I love the sport, I love it in a different way other than playing and kind of how can I impact 30 other players instead of just myself. So I decided I wanted to start coaching. So that was about 2 years ago that I like genuinely realized, I want to be a coach. And with that, through my degrees, I'm currently doing my master's at FSU in sports management. And that's also opened up my eyes to like, there's way more to sport than just the actual sport. Um, so yeah, now I'm kind of on a journey of doing my coaching licenses. I currently have my C coaching license, hopefully going to do my B next year. And I get to go home every 6 months, which is super lucky. Get to see my family and kind of live the best of both worlds, being in Africa and then being in the US. So that's a little bit about me. I'm obviously still young in the industry, but I'm definitely looking to see how I can impact it regardless of my age.
Yeah, I won't give you a hard time about not being in our program and being in a sport management program, but I couldn't resist. I couldn't resist. Tell us a little bit about, you said appreciation of sport is
Mm.
different in the US. Talk a little bit about your experiences in South Africa versus the US. What is different?
So right off the bat, I would say just the funding is a very big thing. Sports in South Africa is big, rugby's big, soccer's big. We call it football, so it's a little different to your football. But essentially, it's the funding. A lot of companies, a lot of local businesses, they don't really think about, oh, how can we help, local clubs? How can we help local high schools? And so, for me, there were times where I'm playing soccer matches literally on a farm with cows, running around. Now, for everyone that has been to South Africa, it's nowhere near what a lot of people think. There is, it's very much populated. There's a lot of things going on. We've got really good technology, but in the sports realm of things, it's kind of you do sports as a hobby and it's to kind of just keep your kid healthy. It's not really how can I make this a career, you know? Um, and here when I tell people I'm a coach, they're like, "Oh my goodness, that's great." Like it's fantastic that you're doing that. Whereas back home, if you're a coach, it's like it's kind of because you couldn't get anything else, like you don't have a degree or there's no other job you can get. So you kind of just get thrown into you swam when you were 7 years old, so now you're a swim coach. So I think
You don't think that's also true in the US?
yes and no. I think that in the US, there's definitely a lot of people that are a little bit more old school, thinking that sports is more of just a passion.
Mm,
But at the same time, I do believe that nowadays, majority of people are starting to realize like you can make a career out of this.
mm.
So it's definitely there in the US, but it's nowhere near like South Africa in the sense of mm, it's just another hobby.
Now, do you think, speaking of South Africa and the culture of how sports are viewed, do you think your rationale is because you are a woman in a female sport, and female sports tend to be less supported financially uh, everywhere?
Mm.
Is it that, or is it just a general sports in general, whether it be male or female sports in South Africa, just don't get the infrastructure support, the financing to be high level professional career focused?
So I definitely think that being a female does impact it a little bit back home. But honestly, I think males are kind of affected by it as well. You know, you can have I've got some friends that are playing professional rugby but still need to have another job. And that's for me, I kind of compare that to football here, American football, and how here, if you're a professional American football player, there's no need for you to be working an office job, you
Mm,
know?
mm,
So with that being said, to answer your question, females are definitely less funded, but they're still not funding or support at all. Um, and honestly, especially after COVID and people starting to realize that online instruction can actually be beneficial. A lot of people back home are now starting to think, well, how can we put in that extra time into our kids' sports and not just focus on academics? Which is great, but we're getting there.
mm. You're coming from being an athlete,
Mm.
going into coaching. A lot of people just assume that is an easy transition because you are an athlete. You know the sport inside out. It should be easy coaching. What have your experiences been like?
You can be a great player and a terrible coach, and you can be a terrible player and a great coach. Um, and I hope that that kind of answers your question a little bit. Just because I played doesn't mean it was super easy coming to a coach. Now, do I think that growing up and through me playing and the fact that I played a lot with boys and I kind of had to stand my ground, do I think that a lot of my leadership qualities came from playing? Absolutely. But the transition, I think I kind of just focused on the educational side of it. So I knew that just because I play doesn't mean I can coach. And I automatically started the US soccer coaching licenses. Um, and I'm glad I did because now I can see if I didn't do that, I probably wouldn't be as successful as I am now, compared to if I was just an athlete saying I'm a coach now. So it's different. I mean, for yourself, mental coaching, coaching off the field, those are all very, very important components of impacting athletes. And as an athlete, you just think of on field, you think of games, you think of practice, and that's kind of it. So the transition between the two, it wasn't super difficult, but it's definitely different. I think I may have lost you with the connection. Did I lose you there for a sec?
Yes. Okay. I don't know what happened. All of a sudden,
Mm.
everything just went down, but looks like we're still live. So, apologies for that. Let's go back to the question, which was transition from being an athlete into being a coach. What have your experiences been like?
So, being a coach, a good coach, doesn't mean you were a great athlete, and vice versa. If you are a terrible athlete, you may be a great coach. So I don't always believe that because you were good at a sport, you can coach. And with that being said, the transition for me was kind of identifying that there's more to coaching than just on the field components. And I think as an athlete, that's what we think of. We think of we at practice, we are getting great coaching, we then go to a game, we perform, those results are there, and that's it. And I think for me, I really do appreciate the fact that I did take the more educational route of it. So I didn't just think, I'm an athlete, I want to start coaching. I said, I'm an athlete. What type of educational background do I need to then transition into a coach? And that's where my US soccer licenses come from. That's where my podcast, listening to podcasts has really helped a lot, reading books. So, to answer your question, it wasn't a difficult transition, but I definitely think that there's more to it than a lot of athletes may believe. And I'm glad I did it because coaching is my life now. So
What would you say, or maybe one of the two or three things that you found difficult in that transition, where maybe you didn't think about it, or you thought about it and you thought, well, I'll be able to do this, and then, wow, I really don't know too much about this, I need to go learn. What were those things?
so there's two things. One comes from the fact that initially my transition from being an athlete to a coach came within a team that I was playing for up
Mm,
until and I think the most difficult challenge that I had was, how do I now transition this season from being an athlete and a team player with all of my players to now being an assistant coach and kind of putting on that coaching hat of, I'm your coach now, and luckily enough, I had a head coach or my supervisor that he really took the time and put the effort into me to kind of teach me the things of like boundaries and how do I now transition between being a friend to a coach. And I'm lucky because the girls that I did have, they respected it. They oftentimes people can put you in a position where you now have to make a decision, and they respected me so much that I never dealt with that. But it was definitely a challenge because when I told people like, "Hey, I'm now the assistant coach," they're like, "You're 20, 21. You're an assistant coach for a team that you played for. Like, can't be serious." So that challenge and kind of having to prove to people that it's not really just a joke and that it is something that I take seriously, and so do my athletes. That was the one thing. And then the second thing for me, coaching wise, was game analysis. That to me, and kind of analyzing games, analyzing mental performance, I had to put extra time and effort in my coaching courses for that because I always thought one goal means one goal. You know, great academics means great academics, but there's so many components that you need to analyze that then move up to that. So that was probably my two biggest challenges for sure.
mm. Okay, we're going to take a short break and we're going to be back as we talk to Dani about her experiences transitioning from athlete into coach and how that's going for her. So we'll be back in just a minute. The mission of FSU Coach is to prepare and equip the next generation of coaches and sports professionals with best practices and current research to enable them to pursue excellence. We have two academic programs, the online graduate certificate, which is 4 classes, and also a 10-class master's in athletic coaching. Our graduate certificate and master's program can be started at any time, either the summer, fall, or spring. All of our classes have the word coach or coaching in them, and they're taught by coaches for coaches.
The types of classes that we offer focus on the athlete as a whole person. We focus on the theory and practice, the research, the helping skills, even some of the mental performance behind what it goes into being an athlete. I came to FSU Coach because I truly believed in the mission and the purpose of the program.
I think I have my dream job being a head coach at Florida State, but I know there's always more ways that I can help my athletes and better prepare as a coach. So I thought joining this master's program would help me learn different ways to attack my job. If you're interested in going into coaching or joining the FSU Coach program, I would just say don't even think about it and do it.
And we're back. We're talking to Dani Dayani about life as a coach, transitioning from being an athlete. I'm curious, you talked about getting your licenses within soccer. What is that like? What is getting a license like? what do you think is good about those licenses, and maybe what areas perhaps need more improvement? What are you lacking from taking those licenses? And I ask this because a lot of sports organizations create their own certification programs, just like soccer does, volleyball, you name it. But a lot of times those are focused on strategies, techniques, skill, and maybe not so much on many of the other things that go into coaching, which you started talking about just before the break.
So I definitely think the benefits of the licenses is that it does kind of give you the overall holistic perspective on what it's like to be a coach. So you kind of start from the bottom, you start with the 7 versus 7 in soccer. Once you then get that certification, you start with 9 versus 9, then 11 versus 11. So that to me is great because you're starting from the fundamentals. And one small thing, it's super random, but one small thing that I learned was you cannot hit at the ball if you are under 12 years old. Back home, that's something that we were never taught. So you have 8-year-olds that are hittering the ball, and it's actually affecting their future development because their brain is being boggled. So in sports. So um, I definitely think that with regards to age specific coaching, the licenses are great because it kind of teaches you how to coach based on the level that you're coaching at. Um, and recently, when I did my C license in Tampa, I really, really liked the fact that we had online instruction and then we also had in person instruction. So that was great. With regards to areas of improvement, I think a lot of the US soccer certifications are based on the way that US soccer operates. So their formations, kind of what their strategies are. And essentially, up until the C license, which is what I've gotten, you have to do it based on their philosophies and not your teams. Um, on the flip side, the B and the A and the professional licenses, that works with your team specifically and it's a little bit more personalized. So for me, I just think a suggestion I would give them is, kind of starting that from the 7 versus 7, like make it a little bit more personalized to the coach so they can then relate that to their team that they're coaching. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So that's essentially, probably the only weakness that I would say. Now, I love the connections that I've made through the licensing because it kind of gives you a benchmark. It gives you a benchmark and it gives you a platform that now you can connect with other coaches. And in this industry, as you know, that's what it's about. It's about the connections. It's about honestly having a common interest as well. And these certifications kind of give you that because you have access to the coaches that are in it with you, which is great.
You talked about making this a career,
Mm.
and I'm curious how you see yourself making this a career, because many coaches in the US, it's a part-time job, maybe even a volunteer job. There's not much money in coaching. How do you see yourself transitioning this into a career where you don't have to go get that second job?
Yeah. So I would love to kind of get into the student athlete development within coaching. So kind of combining the two would be my ideal job. But essentially just coaching at the highest level. And for me, coaching at FSU, that's the highest level right there. So I would love to be able to, coach for a top 5 Division 1 school. And within that, I'm also doing student athlete development off the field as well. So it's not necessarily a second job, it's just more an incorporation of both. Um, but I mean, I'm moving to Tampa. I graduate this December, moving to Tampa, and I have a coaching job already lined up there with a really good um, with a really good program. And the rise of female coaches is needed now, so I kind of feel like I'm being put at the right place at the right time. I definitely think that luck plays a part in my future, but I also think that the things that I've done has kind of set me up for that. So, being 23 and having a C license is unheard of. I was the youngest in my group. Um, And so that I think is definitely putting me in a position to then become hopefully a top 5 Division 1 coach, maybe at FSU. We'll see.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Not while Penske's still there. I know that much.
No, he's doing great. Yeah, he's doing great.
Yeah. So in looking at coaching as a whole, your experiences as an athlete and now your experiences as a coach, what have you learned that you feel other coaches should also learn from your experiences?
So the first one would be, I think a lot of coaches or people in sporting positions in general, they kind of have a have, do, be mindset. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
Did you say have to be?
have, do, be mindset.
Okay.
So what that essentially means is when I have something, I can then do something and then I can then be something. Whereas for me, I flip it, and it's something that I read in a book, and it's basically a be, do, have mindset. So it's flipped, and it's kind of like a who must I be as a coach? Who must I be to then be able to do the things that I need to do, and then have the support system around me, have the accomplishments, have the success rate, So going back to your question, I think things that a lot of coaches should try and adopt is kind of that be, do, have mindset. You got to be it first. You have to give 100% before you expect your athletes to do it. And so that's something that I've been working on myself, and there's always, room for improvement. But for any coaches that are on here listening or will hopefully be listening to this afterwards, I definitely think a be, do, have mindset is super important.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Now, if somebody does want to reach out to you on social media, maybe they got a question, maybe they just want to network with you or pick your brains, what's the best way for them to reach out?
LinkedIn would be the best. That would, yep. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have, or if you just want to connect, very happy to do so.
Yeah, and for those of you listening on the podcast, if you just look for Dani, Dani, and then Dayani on LinkedIn, I think there's already one of you on there, not surprisingly. Pretty unique name. And you'll be able to find her and connect with her and go from there.
Yeah.
Dani, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
I just think I want to, congratulate and highlight the FSU coach certification, just because it's something that we've been in talks about, and I definitely want to do. As an international, I need to be able to finish one degree to then do another. So it's definitely something I want to do. But I think, kudos to you guys for kind of creating a platform where coaching is not only on-field components, but at the same time, anyone taking this degree or the certification, it's everything to do with coaching. And that's what's great about it. I've looked into a lot of other coaching certifications and degrees, and there's a few classes that are English and has nothing to do with it, So just to highlight what FSU coach is doing, and the fact that we're kind of uplifting the knowledge of our coaches, which then trickles down to our performance of our athletes. So thank you for that. And I appreciate being on this podcast with you. And thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, just a reminder, everybody, we try to do these once every week, once every couple of weeks. So be sure to subscribe or follow wherever you're watching these. But on behalf of myself, Tim Baghurst, and Dani Dayani, thank you so much for watching.
Thank you, guys.